from fighting a revolution against a king and a parliament on an island 3,000 miles away, because the king and the parliament dispatched soldiers who could write their own search warrants, to voting for representatives in the Congress who would, with or without reading the legislation, purport to authorize our own employees. The federal agents work for us, in case they've forgotten. We're the employer, they're the employee, and yet they can write their own search warrants. Well, the Fourth Amendment to the United States Constitution says that only judges can write search warrants, and they can only do so after hearing evidence of probable cause, meaning under oath. Someone from the government has testified before a judge that the person to be arrested or the thing to be seized, I'm quoting directly from the Fourth Amendment, possesses or presents evidence of a crime, not that a federal agent wants to be able to get something without having to go to a judge. All right. The Patriot Act limits these self-written search warrants to financial institutions. Well, what would you do if you were the government and wanted your agents to write search warrants for things other than financial institutions? So in the chapter in 1984 on Newspeak, changed the definition of financial institutions, which of course the government did, in a bizarre and unheard of piece of legislation called the Intelligence Authorization Act of '03, signed by President Bush on December 13, 2003. He waited for that day to sign it because he knew something had happened the day before, which would cause his signature to dissipate to the lower pages of the newspaper because some event occurred 10,000 miles away, which would captivate the country. This particular legislation, which nobody read, and which was enacted by a voice vote in both houses of Congress because it was an appropriation to the various intelligence agencies, nevertheless changed the definition of financial institution. So financial institution, from and after this piece of legislation in the federal parlance, not only means banks, savings and loans, trust companies, it also means stockbrokers, all right, jewelry stores, restaurants, gambling casinos, hotels, pharmacies, bodegas, delicatessens, lawyers' offices, healthcare providers, HMOs, computer companies, telephone companies, and that great financial institution to which we would all propose our fortunes, the post office. But you can see how insidious the government is. Give federal agents the right to write their own search warrants, but limit it to financial institutions, and then, under cover of darkness, change the ordinary plain meaning of financial institutions that lets them look at almost anything they want. But by the way, December 13, 2003, the day we captured Saddam Hussein. Obviously, the public's eye was on that hand and not on that hand. I was debating once with one of my more irritable, truly irritable Fox colleagues one night, and he complained to me that the Secretary of Homeland Security, Janet, what's her name? I know what you're thinking, and the answer is no. She came out with some kind of a report saying people who believe that the government taxes too much, regulates too much, people who believe that the right to keep and bear arms is a personal, individual, natural right, people who believe that life begins at conception, people who believe in the right to privacy are a danger to society. And my colleague looks at me and said, well, Judge, she knows, never mind her last name, nonsense, she knows that you believe in the right to life, that you believe in the right to keep and bear arms, that you think taxes are too high. I think taxation is theft. So by definition, I think taxes are too high. But how does she know that everybody else, how does she know that anyone else thinks that? I looked at my irritable colleague and I said, Bill, because her agents can read your mail before you get it, can get everything you said to your doctor or your lawyer, not your priest, I haven't made that a financial institution yet, can capture every keystroke on every computer that you touch. And he looked at me and said, well, where did she get that power from? From the Patriot Act, which you supported when you thought it would be reposed in the hands of those you trusted. Now Madison reminded us that men, by which he meant men and women, but he said men are not angels. That's why the government needs restraints. And that's why no government, no matter how noble its goals, its motivation may be, must recognize the restraints imposed on it by the Constitution. Jefferson called them chaining down the government. And the restraints imposed upon the government by its recognition of the natural law, its recognition that there are areas of human behavior immune from regulation by the government because our humanity trumps the government's wishes. Not too long ago, I was on air with Congressman James Clyburn, who's the number 3 ranking Democrat in the House. Now, Fox has played this hundreds of times. You'll know why when I tell you what he said to me. If I asked him a simple question, I was later accused of asking a trick question. You tell me if this is a trick question. Congressman, where in the Constitution is the federal government authorized to manage health care? There's no trick about that. Anyway, he says to me, Judge, he was in Washington, I was in New York, most of what we do down here is not authorized by the Constitution. Now that's refreshing candor. It's very upsetting, but it's unbelievable candor. That's the piece that Fox has run 4,000 times. He then said, can you tell me where it is prohibited in the Constitution for us to manage health care? Now that is a very serious statement because that reveals a profound misunderstanding of the nature of the federal government. The Congress is not a general legislature. It doesn't exist in order to right every wrong. It can't tax any event or regulate any behavior. It is limited to the 17 unique, specific, discrete delegations of authority given to it when the states formed the Constitution. In his first inaugural address, in the second paragraph, Reagan reminded us it is the states that formed the federal government and not the other way around. Had I been the draftsman of that, I would have added the following. And power given by the states can be taken back when it's been abused. And that's where we are now. Let's see. Medicaid broke. Medicare broke. Social Security broke. The Post Office broke. Amtrak broke. The Department of Defense broke. You remember the Mustang Ranch? They didn't pay their taxes, and the government took them over. And they ran that into the ground. So the government that couldn't provide hookers and booze to truckers in the desert wants to manage health care. That's where we find ourselves today. I haven't even started the talking, and I won't, because this will go on for a while. Having started talking yet about their micromanaging of the economy. I don't even believe we have a two-party system in this country. I think we have a one-party system. It's called the big government party. There's a Republican wing that likes war and deficits and assaults on civil liberties, and there's a Democratic wing that likes taxes and wealth transfers and assaults on commercial liberties. But there was a time when we sent people to Washington because they believed in freedom. Now we send